हेलो एवरीवन। वेलकम टू लीगल टॉक्स विद सीएस यतिन। तो इस सीरीज में हम लोग बात करने वाले हैं एलएलबी सेमेस्टर 2 के कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन 1 के कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट केस लॉज के बारे में। सो मॉड्यूल नंबर 1 जो मुंबई यूनिवर्सिटी का सिलेबस है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन 1 का, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल फिलोसॉफी, प्रीएम्बल एंड सिटीजनशिप। तो चलिए बात करते हैं एक लैंडमार्क जजमेंट से, केशवानंद भारती वर्सेस स्टेट ऑफ केरला 1973। So today we are going to understand one of the most important constitutional law judgments in the Indian history, Kesavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala, which was decided in 1973 by a 13-judge bench of the Supreme Court, the case that saved the Indian Constitution. This judgment is so important that almost every constitutional amendment today is tested on the basis of this particular case. So there were some questions. Can Parliament change anything in the Constitution? Can it even remove elections? Can it take away your fundamental rights forever? In 1973, the Supreme Court of India answered these questions in a historic judgment which completely changed Indian constitution law forever. So this is the story of the famous Kesavananda Bharati case, the case that gave birth to basic structure doctrine and protected Indian democracy. Before understanding the facts, we need to understand the political background of India during that period. After independence, the government wanted to introduce land reforms and remove the zamindari system. Large amounts of land owned by wealthy landlords and religious institutions were being acquired by the state. However, many such laws were challenged before courts on the ground that they violated fundamental rights, especially right to property, equality under Article 14, religious freedom under Article 25 and 26. At that time, there was a major constitutional conflict between Parliament, which wanted unlimited power to amend the constitution, and judiciary, which wanted to protect fundamental rights. Let's go deep into the earlier important cases. Shankari Prasad case 1951. In this case, Supreme Court said Parliament can amend fundamental rights. Next comes Sajjan Singh case 1965. Again, the Honorable Supreme Court held that Parliament has wide amendment powers. Golaknath case 1967, the Golaknath versus State of Punjab, then came a turning point. In Golaknath case, the Honorable Supreme Court held that Parliament cannot amend fundamental rights, and this created a huge conflict between Parliament and judiciary. Now let us understand the actual facts of the Kesavananda Bharati case. Swami Kesavananda Bharati was the head of the Hindu religious mutt in Kerala. The Kerala government passed land reform laws which imposed restrictions on ownership of property held by religious institutions. The petitioner challenged these laws, stating that his property law rights are violated. Religious rights under Article 25 and 26 were affected, and Parliament cannot destroy fundamental rights through constitutional amendments. The biggest constitutional question before the Honorable Supreme Court was, can Parliament amend any part of the Constitution under Article 368, or are there any certain limitations? 13-judge bench. This case was heard by the largest bench in the Indian history, that is 13 judges. The hearing continued for almost 68 days. The arguments were extremely detailed and complex. Finally, in the April 1973, the judgment was delivered by a narrow majority of 7-6. The Supreme Court held, yes, Parliament has wide powers to amend the constitution, but Parliament cannot destroy or damage the basic structure of the constitution. Now, the main core question was, what is basic structure? The court did not provide a fixed list, but it identified certain essential features of the constitution which cannot be destroyed. These include supremacy of the constitution, rule of law, judicial review, democracy, republic form of government, secularism, separation of powers, federalism, dignity of individual, free and fair elections. Now, why this case was so revolutionary? Because before this case, many believed Parliament was supreme. But after Kesavananda Bharati case, the constitution became supreme. Parliament became limited and judiciary became the protector of the constitutional identity. Now let's take a practical example. Imagine if tomorrow Parliament passes an amendment saying that elections will never happen again. India will become a dictatorship. Courts cannot review government actions. But after Kesavananda Bharati case, such amendments can be struck down because they destroy the basic structure. This particular doctrine was later used in many famous cases, including Indira Gandhi case, Minerva Mills case, NJSC case, Ayer Coelho case. Even today, every constitutional amendment is checked on the basis of basic structure doctrine. So, students, remember, Kesavananda Bharati is not just a constitutional case. It is a shield that protects Indian democracy. It established that parliament is powerful, but the constitution is supreme. If you like this detailed explanation, do like, share, and subscribe to Legal Talks with CS Yatin. In the next video, we will discuss another historical constitutional case where Supreme Court used basic structure doctrine against political misuse of constitutional amendments. Till then, goodbye and happy learning.